These are 10 books I recommend you start reading if you're not a native English speaker. As you probably found out, I am not a native English speaker, and I had to find my way in the English word in the English books by trying everything I got. The books in English in my country were and still are very expensive, so most of them I got, secondhand, or I found in antique bookstores, or I just raised enough money so I can get brand new. These are the books I recommend you start with if you're not a native English speaker and you don't want to have any issues while reading them. First one is Matilda. Matilda is a children's book, and even though it's a children's book, I read it when I was 17, I think, and I first read it in my native language, and then I read it in English. And it was such a beautiful book. It wasn't difficult at all. I mean, I thought it wouldn't be difficult after I read it in my native language. And, even though it's a children's story, you've probably seen the movie. The book is even better than the movie is. Matilda is about a girl who has powers. She has powers to do things with her mind, and it's not just a book about powers, it's also a very funny book because there is the principal, which is a very large lady, and she is a very bad person as well. And there are some parts where Matilda, who is a child that is not wanted by her parents but is wanted by her teacher, that are very, very funny, and I still remember them. That's why I'm trying not to laugh. I just remember a part from the movie and from the book. Let me try and find it, because the book also has a lot of pictures, illustrations, but this is what I wanted to show you. This is one of the parts, or at least this is how it's illustrated in the book. And yeah, I always remember this book as being one of the best books that I read in English when it comes to how easy it was to get through it. Heartstopper and the Heartstopper series. I have here the whole series, almost the whole series. The 5th book is missing from here, not for long. And I recommend you start with this because, as you can see, it's a graphic novel. And not only that it's a graphic novel, but it's a very, very beautiful story. The language is very simple. There are simple terms that are being used and simple words. And, the story, as you can see, boy meets boy. This is an LGBT book. There's also the Netflix TV series, which unfortunately kind of ended abruptly, but we'll get a movie, to summarize the whole story. But this one is a very beautiful book. I always remember and I rewatch the series whenever I feel like I want to watch something beautiful. I read the series because if you want, you can read the whole series in a day. It's very short, and being a graphic novel, you just dive through it like you dive through a movie. And it has a special place in my heart. I'm sure that you feel the same, but I do recommend this to be one of the first books that you read in English. Harry Potter. Harry Potter is the best book series that I ever read. I've been wanting to do a separate review on Harry Potter and what I felt, but every time I try, I think that maybe I should reread the books because I only read them once when I was 17. Maybe I should do that. But every time I try, something stops me. I don't know what, but I'll try and talk about them right now. Even though some of them are big books, as you can see, this is the 5th book, The Order of the Phoenix. They have a special place in my heart, and I'm sure that they have a special place in your heart as well. And they are not difficult at all to start with. The only thing that you might find a bit difficult if you're not a native English speaker is Hagrid's language, because he's Scottish, and you can actually read that he is Scottish because he eats some of the words, and you have to make sure you understand what he's saying by maybe rereading that sentence once again. As you can see, the first 3 books are pretty short and they start to get bigger with the first book, Goblet of Fire, which is also my favorite book from the whole series. I chose to show you this version because this was the easiest to take off from the library. But why do I think you should start with this one in case you haven't? And even if you read them in your native language, I recommend you give them a chance in English, because some of the words, some of the things that are being written there are being lost in translation. For example, Tom Riddle's name is different from what I know in almost all the other languages, because they need to get to Voldemort. When you add the words and you change them, they need to be Voldemort at the end. So unfortunately the name has to be changed because Tom Riddle is not Voldemort in all the languages. This series has a very, very, very special place in my heart, and I think that you should give it a chance, because even if you're not a child, I wasn't a child when I read them, not because I couldn't read when I was a child, but I wasn't allowed to read them when I was a child because they were considered not religious enough. But I read them when I was 17, and I am glad I did, because that was the happiest period of my life. And one of the reasons is because I read these books. The language that JK used is pretty simple, especially at the beginning, because let me tell you one thing about Harry Potter that I discovered while reading them. Even though the first 3 books are pretty childish, I wouldn't consider them necessarily childish. They grow when Harry grows, so they become heavier, they become darker, they become, just like Harry grows and the issues that he is facing become much more serious, that's how the books become as well. But I'm sure you won't be having any issues when you read these books. Next one is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. This was my first LGBT book that I read when I was 15, and once I started it, I couldn't put it down. I read this book first in my native language, and then I ordered it in English and I read it in English. I read it in, I think, less than 2 days. I couldn't put it down. Not only because I was finding myself in one of the main characters, but also because the story was so sincere and so beautiful and so self-discovering that I was just not able to stop. I'm sure that if I would read it now again, it will be the same. The chapters are very short, the language is not difficult at all, and the story just runs itself on a wheel. It's difficult to tell you why this book is so special to me. That's the reason of being special. You're not really able to explain why it's special to you. It's your own relationship with it, and I have my own relationship with this book. But I found myself a lot in one of the characters, and I think that even though you're not maybe an LGBT book fan, you'll be a fan of this one, because it's, I think, one of the most sincere books I ever read. And the fact that the story is similar to the author's real life and what happened to him when he was 15, 16, of the age of the characters as well, makes it so much better. Cinderella is Dead. This one is... I'm a big fan of Cinderella. I'm a big fan of the Disney movie. I'm a big fan of the Disney book. I'm a big fan of Cinder. I just got Stepsister, which is also about Cinderella's sister. This one, let's say that it disappointed me a bit. I was expecting so much more. If you hear something, that's my dog. Let me show him to you. So this is my dog. He goes by a lot of names, and if you hear his paws and nails, that's him telling me that he wants some love. So where were we? Cinderella is Dead. It has nothing to do with Cinderella, maybe at the end. This is 200 after Cinderella passed, and basically the kingdom is almost ruined. Everything is worse than it ever was, and these two characters try to save the kingdom, and they're somehow related to Cinderella. Unfortunately, I don't remember very much, but it was very easy to go through. So if you're a fan of Cinderella and you think that you will love this book, it's a very good choice if you want to start reading a book in English. Carry On. Carry On is also an LGBT book, but this one has magic, has monsters, and it has a lot of action. It's very easy to go through. If you know the author, they wrote Carry On and Eleanor in Park, I think it was the first one, which are very beautiful books. This one is a bit different from the other ones because it has magic, and I think it also has a sequel. I'm not really sure. I think I saw it, but I'm not sure. It's a very good book to start with, especially if you want to see a combination between LGBT and magic and monsters. It's a very good choice. And if we're still talking about magic, LGBT, and monsters, I think that also a very good choice would be the Infernal Devices trilogy. Even though I haven't read it, trying to recommend as many books as I can. Neverwhere. Neil Gaiman is in top 5 favorite authors of mine ever. I read almost all of his books, and unfortunately, this is one of the only ones that I got to read in English. I wish I would have read one of my favorite books, The Graveyard's book, in English. Unfortunately, I didn't read it in English, but this one was almost as good as that one was as well. If you're familiar with the London Tube and with the London Underground Live, it would be a very good recommendation for you because you would understand a bit better, all the tube stations and everything that happens there. But the language and the way Neil writes, it's just art. I consider it art because he has such a way to write and to create very, very interesting and unforgettable characters. I still remember now some of the characters that I read in this book in 2017, I think. That's when I read this book. Go read it. And also read The Graveyard book. That one is top notch. Rosemary's Baby. Rosemary's Baby was pretty easy to read. I love the fact that it's basically a horror book, but it's not very horror. It's on the edge of being horror and not being horror. And I liked it a lot because, first of all, I think we all watched the movie and I adored the movie. But I watched it a very long time ago, so I couldn't remember some of the things from there. But the book, as you can see, is very short. It's very, very beautiful and very easy to read. It takes you where it has to take you. I don't think I'm allowed to say where it takes you here on YouTube, but it's very dark. That's what I was saying. It's in between horror and not horror because it doesn't basically, scares you, but it gives you the chills. The only book that scared me and it gave me like big chills was The Woman in Black. But I read that one in my language, so I cannot present it right now. Very good book, easy to read, and obviously it's better than the movie, but check out the movie. The movie is also very good. Disobedience. This one is not a popular book, and I got it when this edition, the movie tie-in edition, came out when I was living in London, and I loved the trailer of the movie. It was presented everywhere in London. I also love both of the actresses who play in this movie. This is also an LGBT book, but it's very different from the other ones that I presented because this is about adults, grown-up people who are trying to discover or accept what happened in the past and what could be now. One of them is married, one of them is not. And they have to discover what both of them want after one of them is coming back to the village where she grew up, to the city where she grew up, where the other character lives. And while reading this, I was just so much kept in the story. I think I finished it in 3 days, and you should give it a chance. Even though it's not very popular, I love when I discover a book that is not very popular, and I love it. The last one on the list is I Must Betray You. This book is about the 1989 Romanian Revolution, and I got the chance to read this book and to witness something that I already knew, and I was happy to see that most of the events and most of the words, the names that were used were, very close to what actually happened. Let me know if you want me to do a separate review on this one, but I loved the fact that some of the words were actually kept in Romanian, my native language. It was just an interesting way of putting the words on paper, and one of the things that I really like, especially that it has a lot of characters, is the fact that every chapter is written in Romanian. The number is written in Romanian. For example, this is 76, which is 76. And of course, it has pictures with the two monsters. Good book. Let me know if you've read any of these ones, if you agree with my recommendations, and if you haven't, if I convinced you to read any. Hit a like, subscribe, and comment for more content.